the 35,000, in honor of the 35,000 people who have died of overdoses in the last 15 years. A lot of people on this call have lost a lot of people that they loved. This settlement, to me, is overall, it's very good. I think that the amount that was negotiated is a good and fair amount, given the legal risk and all that, and not spending years in court. I also think all of the Ohio jurisdictions except Scioto County have signed on. Scioto County, which is Portsmouth, thought that it didn't accurately reflect the enormous pain that they've suffered. However, I've analyzed it myself several ways based on overdose deaths, population, and you can always nitpick, but I think it's roughly fair. It's not worth fighting about. So I've been a big supporter of the One Ohio opioid settlement from the beginning. And as you'll see, I believe it's gone off track, but I just it's complicated to remind everyone. The distributors deal is worth about 800 million. And people often say, oh, it's an 800 million deal. It's really $1 billion deal because the Johnson & Johnson deal is 186 million. And both of those are already confirmed. And there's more to come. Purdue Pharma, which the OxyContin maker, is probably going to flow into One Ohio. The CVS the jury reached a verdict. That money will probably flow into One Ohio. So at 1 billion, I think it could go up to 1.5 billion and even more over time. The distributors is worth paying attention to. I just posted about an hour ago, the very first payment from the opioid settlement is going out really as we speak. And over the next few days, it'll all be out next week. And I got a list from the Ohio Attorney General office, and I published it, that will show like how there's 530 local governments who are getting it. And I'll show that later, how much they're going to get. And this is what I'd like. I'll go on to the next one, so it'll show it. So this is the opioid payment schedule. It's going to last over 18 years. The Johnson & Johnson is over 15 years. So it's a steady stream of money that's going up and down, but it's all new money. It hasn't been committed before. And that's extremely important because you don't have to take it away from anyone. This is how the money's going to be divided. 15% is going to the state of Ohio. 30% is going to 2,000 local governments. Only 500 of them have accepted the money because most of them are small local governments, and they'll be getting less than they'll be getting just a few $100s, and it's more to spend it and to receive it. So they're essentially rejecting it. And that's not a bad thing. And then 55% goes to the One Ohio Foundation, which in theory was an awesome idea, like the Columbus Foundation or the Cleveland Foundation. And that's where the problems are right now. So I want to talk about the second most important pool of money that everyone on this call should consider going after and going to use. It's the 30% share that's going directly to local governments. And it'll be about $10–30 million a year over time. And Granville Township, where I am now, is getting $900. Franklin County is getting $500,000. The city of Columbus is getting $348,000 just this year in the first payment. And that money can be used for, there's an 8-page list of uses, including syringe programs, and it can be used to buy needles. And I talked with the Canton Syringe Program today, which is run by the city health department. So the money will flow into the city. And the Canton Syringe Program has always struggled financially to get money. And this is money that can be used. Canton's getting $48,000. That would make a huge difference in this. So as we talk later and I show you the regional and the local structure, I think everyone should find out how much is going to their village, their city, their township, their county, and talk to their elected officials about deploying this 5,000, this 30,000, this $200 to things that they do. Because $900 doesn't make a lot of difference to like a big institution. It wouldn't even make that much difference to Harm Reduction Ohio. But to a local activist, someone giving out in the lock zone, $900, or like Trish, who runs Newark Homeless Outreach, that really has tangible benefits that you can do. And this money goes directly to city councils. Like they can spend it on anything opioid related. And many of them, because the money is going to counties, township, villages, and cities, but not to health departments or mental health boards. Structurally, that's a problem because it's health departments and mental health boards that deal with opioid issues. Townships and counties deal with stormwater drainage and roads. So they're all good people, but in the structure of Ohio government, it's flowing left when it should flow right. So I think that people who are working on the opioid issue now are extremely well positioned to go to this relatively small amount of money, $3,000, and say, this is what you should put that $3,000 to that can make a tangible difference in our community. And there's 2,000 local governments who are getting it. And this is what I just said, ask your elected officials for this money. And we posted on our website just a little while ago, how much money is going to each government. So you can go, and most of them is less than 1,000. It's really hard for them to spend, but you can spend it well. So these are examples of local payments. Columbus is going to get $8 million over the course. This year, they're getting $348,000, and Franklin County, $500,000. So I've been talking to people in Columbus, like that can make a substantial difference. Or as my board members know, we've been talking about trying to do an online statewide syringe service program. That money could do this incredible innovation. Another one is like Chillicothe in Ross County. Chillicothe is getting $27,000. The county's getting $87,000. So not like Columbus level money, but substantial money, whether it's Findlay or wherever. Youngstown's getting $50,000. Mahoning County is getting $138,000. That could make a big difference in these communities. And that's just the minority share that's going to local governments. So the most important pool of money and the biggest problem right now is the 55% going to the One Ohio Foundation. The MOU is a pretty good MOU. It required that the foundation be a 501c3. Where Harm Reduction Ohio is a 501c3. Some of you probably work for 501c3s. We have great 501c3s in the state, the Columbus Foundation, Cleveland Foundation, Cincinnati Foundation, and they're nimble, they're creative. Interact for Health has done amazing things in the Cincinnati area. So I was real excited that that's what it was going to use. And I thought it was really a creative idea by the Ohio people who negotiated it to put it into that foundation. But it was a little bit of a sacrifice because it's essentially you're taking money that government could have and you're putting it where it could be used more wisely. It was also an effort to make sure the legislature just didn't take it like they did with the tobacco settlement. They used it 1 year to balance the budget. So this was, to try to get political buy-in, create a regional structure. So the state's divided into 19 regions, and each region has its own One Ohio Regional Board, which is extremely important and why it's impossible at a state level to know everything that's going on in the big state, but you can know what's going on in your region. And all of these regions are going to get millions of dollars. And that's the most important place to exercise your influence and your knowledge. So, and not only are there 19 One Ohio regions, there's also many One Ohio county level boards. Each does it a little differently, like Licking County, where I am, has its own board. And many counties have their own board, and then they vote a person to be on the regional board. And then the regional board votes a person to be on the state board. So one reason it's hard for people to get involved is it's complicated. And these are the One Ohio regions. So I'm in Region 18. Region 10 is like the Appalachian counties. Franklin County, Columbus is its own region. Cuyahoga is its own region. And this is really where the rubber meets the road at the regional level. So here I want to start showing you the problems. This is the state board. In all of them, and these are representatives of the regional boards. There's 29 members on the state board, 2 vacancies right now. But a thing you might notice is how similar they all look to each other. And I'll give you a numeric breakdown of how it's not really a 501c3, it's a government board. And it's going to be ruled a government board because it's pretty much all government officials on it. So the One Ohio Foundation board has 29 members. How many members have lived experience with the opioid crisis? 0. At the opening meeting, they asked everyone to give a little background. And there was one Ohio State professor who said he'd been sober since 1979. So he is the closest thing to lived experience. He didn't say what drug it was, and I asked him and he wouldn't tell me. So I don't know if it's opioids, I don't know if it's alcohol, but you know, fentanyl wasn't around in 1979 and things were different back then. I'm an old person, I can tell you. So board members with shared experience, from what they have said about themselves, there's only one board member who has shared experience. For those who don't know, lived experience is generally people who have struggled with opioids or struggled with drugs themselves. So people in recovery would be people with lived experience. People with shared experience would be people who love people who have struggled with drugs. Like Scott Weida, who wrote a wonderful book on the loss of his son. And Laura Cash, our board member, is on, who lost her son. They have shared experience. So I have shared experience. I don't have lived experience. And people with shared experience, really, even more so than people with lived experience, are the backbone of overdose prevention, especially the moms and the wives and the women. They are out there doing it every day and they're fearless. They'll go into where drugs are being used and they'll give out naloxone and save lives. And they know they have so much knowledge. So here you have a board that really lacks this knowledge. One board member does have shared experience. She's an Ashtabula County Commissioner who is the chair of the board. And she's taking, from what she disclosed publicly at a public meeting, one of her sons struggles with opioids, and she's helping raise one of the son's children. So that is significant shared experience. Unlike a lot of people with shared experience, though, she's very keen into expanding drug task forces. So that's a little different than most people with shared experience, but she does have shared experience and she's part of the conversation. Other problem, and I'm glad Nathaniel Jordan, who runs the largest naloxone distribution program aimed at the Black community, is with us. Only one board member is Black. 20% of opioid deaths so far this year are African Americans. So having 1 out of 29, and Nathaniel will know it, and we've talked about it, like I'm a suburban white guy. I'm not best positioned to go into the city in Columbus. You know, if I work hard enough, I care, but that's what diversity is for. It's not just a numbers game, it's a knowledge game. And that's why board members with lived experience, board members with shared experience, board members who represent the whole community, it's knowledge. You can't do a good job if you are not intimately involved in the opioid problem that's killed 35,000 people. So if you think about 35,000 dead people, how many talented people with shared experience are there? I would say there are hundreds of thousands. I know maybe 1,000 myself. They're amazing. And people with lived experience, people in recovery. How many talented people are there in recovery? Tens of thousands. There's no shortage of qualified people. So this is the professional division of the board with 2 vacancies. 4 members are from the private sector. 19 work for government. 3 are recently retired for government. And of those private sector members of the board, I include Jane Portman, the wife of Senator Rob Portman. You know, so at every stage, it's sort of like just one step away from being a total government entity. And board members who are elected officials, there are 14. 5 members are staffers. They run mental health boards, community action organizations, and 2 vacancies. And what I'd like to say is all of these individuals, many who I've known for a number of years, are great people in and of themselves. Recently retired Lucas County Sheriff John Tharp, Lucas County is Toledo, is maybe the most insightful person on drug policy that I've ever met from every perspective. He's harm reduction friendly. And when he became sheriff, he started the first quick response team in the country. And then he told me the story is one of his first days on the job, he walked through the jail and he saw a fella detoxing and puking and shitting all over himself. And he said, this is not what I want to do. And in the time he got the quick response team, he took 20 officers out of uniform and had them going out the next day, not criminalizing it, not offering them treatment in the lock zone. You know, it was just very kind, and he's really committed to that. So I don't want it to seem like it's a personal attack on any individuals. You would think harm reduction and a sheriff would not see eye to eye, but it's way more complex than that. The problem is the makeup of the team. It's just like you can have 11 5-star quarterbacks on the Ohio State football team, but you don't put 11 5-star quarterbacks on the field. You need big linemen, you need tight ends, you need a whole diversity. And the problem with this board is that they're too much alike and they don't really contact. They don't have enough contact with the people who are dying and the people who are suffering from opioids. So as well-meaning as they may be, they are no more qualified to run this opioid effort and spend $500 million than they would be well-meaning people to go into the Ohio State football team and to run that football operation. There's specialized knowledge and it's showing early on. So here's another look at like the recovery board members, you know, all white. And I point these because the regional boards are in many respects more important than the state board because they will have the first look at who gets funding in your region. So it's extremely important. And I look at it and I don't dislike a single individual, but as a whole, you can just look at it and say, that's not the right group for this. So there's no current central list of who's on all the regional boards. 17 of the 19 regional boards have been formed. The Stark County board's being formed right now. So of the 17 boards that exist, I've been able to identify 127 regional board members. If I could identify them all, I guess it would probably be closer to 200. But of the 127, and by regional board officers, I mean your chair, secretary, or treasurer. Pretty much all of them have that. Not a single one has lived experience. Not a single one is Black. You know, it's regional board members with lived experience, 3, and 2 of them are on a big 20-member Hamilton County board. They're doing a giant board, and they're 2 members of a 20-member board. And, you know, how much influence they will have, I don't know. And also the 2 Black members are on that Hamilton County board. I would guess that there's probably some. Cuyahoga doesn't have a board right now, and Franklin County is forming a board but hasn't. So you would think that Columbus and Cuyahoga might add to the diversity. But regional appointees to the state board, 0. So I don't want to like harp on the problem, but I don't think it's a trivial problem, because if you've been in the corporate world as I have, or if you know anything about management theory, is process will dictate outcome, as well as personnel will dictate outcome. And what's going to happen here is the outcome's being dictated. And I will, in the defense of all of these regional boards and even the state board, the problem was the agreement didn't offer any leadership or guidance on who should be on these boards. So they gave the task to the County Commissioners Association, the Township Trustees Association, and they said, oh, form these boards. So what the people did is they put themselves on the board. County Commissioner, many of the regional boards consist of 2 county commissioners, 2 township trustees, and 2 representatives of municipalities. You know, so it's entirely government is a real common way to do it. So why aren't you on the One Ohio board? Like you would think you could at least sit in the back of the room. Fundamentally, the problem was a lack of openness. Not one of these regions announced that a board was being formed or that positions were being filled. You couldn't apply because you had no idea about it. I didn't have any idea about it. When I would talk to the state, Amy Shadwick, who's the governor drug policy person, call the 19 regions. Call who in the 19 regions, etc. It was really impossible. So no applications for any of these positions, including at the state level. The governor had the right to appoint 5 people, and he did, but he didn't take applications. He worked within people that he knew. No applications from the public were solicited, received, or considered. No local or regional board meetings were announced to the public that they were going to occur. I've been in contact with them, and in the future they plan, and even the Stark County, which is Canton, the city attorney Canton is putting it together, and she told me today, oh, we're definitely going to announce it. But it's too late. You know, really the only fix for this is to start again and to do it right with broad public input. And why that's going to happen, I'll explain in just a minute. Why I'm optimistic it will happen is Ohio, you know, as many of you know, I was a newspaper reporter for many decades, and I know my open meetings and public records law. And Ohio's got a pretty good one. So I went to the meeting on May 16th. I told them I was coming. It didn't occur to me that they would keep me out of the meeting, because I kind of in my head, I've been to more than 1,000 government meetings in my career, and I've never been kept out. Usually they want you in there. And Governor DeWine spoke at this meeting, but I was prohibited from attending, which was a shock to me. Then they held another meeting in which they let us attend, but wouldn't allow us to speak. They had no public comment. Now they're holding a meeting on July 14th that the public can watch, but will be muted. No public comment will be allowed. I told them the Benish law firm, which is running it, and we got one of their representatives online. So Lee, you can take them the message too, because I emailed them that the state law that allows online meetings expired June 30th. So if they're covered by the open meetings law, then they're in violation. And why this is so important is that there's really only one remedy to an open meetings violation, and that's everything that happened at that meeting is invalidated. So if you think about it, if I'm correct, and we've hired a lawyer and that's all in the process. If I'm correct, everything that's been done so far is invalid. So it's a big stick, but I don't feel bad because I've been warning them all along. So the Ohio Sunshine Laws, which were passed like post-Watergate, just to create openness in government. And the Ohio Attorney General puts out like a 120-page manual every year, and it's really detailed. And I've been living with this for many years. So the One Ohio Foundation claim is that it's a nonprofit foundation, not subject to open meetings law. It can operate as if it's the Columbus Foundation or Harm Reduction Ohio. So it claims that it's exempt from open meetings law, public records law, ethics law, and being audited by the state auditor. I think, like, if you're interested and you read the Sunshine Manual, you'll see the weaknesses in their case. There's a long history of nonprofits being ruled government entities, and governments for 35 years have been trying to offload what they do into private advisory groups, et cetera. So to me, they'll likely be shown to be a public body under open meetings law and a public office, as it's called, under public records law. So, and this is really the $500 million question. This is what we disagree on. And the foundation hasn't even applied for nonprofit status yet. It's a $500 million of government money. So if you think about it, really, a $500 million of government money can go to a foundation, a fake foundation that's controlled entirely by government and do everything in secret? I don't think it's going to survive, but you never know. When you go to court, it could go one way or the other. So what does Ohio law say? They must, I believe, must operate in the open, but I'm not a lawyer and it's too complicated to explain. So I will move you on to what the Ohio opioid settlement says, signed by Governor DeWine and Yost. And I'll read it out loud so that you don't have to squint. Meetings shall be open and documents shall be public to the same extent they would be if the foundation was a public entity. I was just talking to a lawyer today, and like none of the lawyers believe me that this is the claim, that, oh, they don't have to, even though it says that, but that is the claim. Then it also goes on to add, the bylaws of the foundation may clarify any other provisions of the memorandum of understanding except this one. This portion of this subsection must be restated in the bylaws. So not only does it say that they're a public entity and that they have to restate it in the bylaws and that they can't change it, but you can't. Oh yeah, so here's what I just read, not to bore you, but here is the policy that they're going to adopt on Thursday. According to their agenda, they're going to take an action on this. And what it says is, on a voluntary basis, to ensure transparency, they will sometimes make the meetings open unless they consider it's not appropriate for the general public. In addition, on a voluntary basis, etc. Or in other words, they decide what's open or not. Imagine. So I won't blather on about that, but it's important. because that's the tool to start it right. And some of you may have seen a story I wrote on the shipwreck, the One Ohio shipwreck. So I decided to do a little, this is the Titanic, the Titanic going down. But I do think we can save the ship. And I'd like to sort of explain what the keys are to doing it. And then I'll take questions. I'll start at the bottom, is that knowledge is power. If you just listen to what they were told and not read the actual documents, you would be powerless. But the documents are in our favor, as well as the politics are in our favor, as well as the passion is in our favor. If you've lost loved ones to opioids, you've lost your friends and been to the funerals, like all this pap about, oh, trust us, we're doing the best we can, will ring a little hollow. So there's three things that need to be done: transparency, open meetings, public records, and Harm Reduction Ohio will take care of that with your support. But we've hired the lawyer, and that's what we're going to do. Public involvement at the state, regional, and local level. That's crucial. So I'm going to try to get together a list of who's on your local board, your regional board, so that you'll know and can contact them. And we're going to try to get like people knowing and involved, like, know how much money is coming in, who controls it, etc. And the impact, the public is important. The impacted population is most important. Because I can say from working in this, and all of you on the line will know, this is something that we have a passion for. It's not just cleaning up brownfields or hoping this. I mean, people's lives are at stake. People have suffered greatly. And in other fields and nonprofits, there's all this talk about how to keep volunteers involved. And harm reduction is not like that at all. We have more volunteers, more passion, no one gives up, than we can put to good use. So this is a wonderful place to dedicate that passion. And my idea is to start Friends of One Ohio, which would be similar to Friends of the American Cancer Society or Friends. And I want it to be Friends because we support this agreement. Why they've made us enemies is befuddling to me, but I think we should be their friends whether they like it or not, because we've been affected, and it's our friends who have died and our children who have died and who are struggling right now. So, and my premise is that overall the settlement's good. I used to say it was the best in the country because that 501c3 foundation was such a wonderful idea. It's unfortunate it's been hijacked by government officials, but I do think that that's something that, so how do I see Friends of One Ohio? Not run by me. Harm Reduction Ohio can guide and provide infrastructure, but I have enough of a voice, too much of a voice. My colleagues tell me to shut up, and I think that's good advice. So I think an independent advocacy organization that's led by people with lived experience, people with shared experience, and our allies in the population, such as, like people in public health or in treatment or who have some connection. And I also think it's important to operate at a state, regional, and local level, because One Ohio and Ohio government in general is highly decentralized. But that's okay, because all of you here have most influence and most knowledge in your community. And this is money to help you and the people can do a good job, do a better job. So, and you can totally rewrite this if you join and form it. But like I listed just sort of like 5 or 6 core beliefs. And one is repetitive. One is that people with lived experience should be directly involved in opioid settlement spending decisions at the state, regional, and local levels, period. And people with shared experience should be directly involved in opioid settlement spending decisions at the state, regional, and opioid and local levels, period. This doesn't mean being a token, being one lived experience on a group of 20 government officials. In my mind, we should be a majority. This group should be a majority on every board. This money is money that we have because people died. It's not from a tax increase. It's because the people we love died. This is our money. And we're grateful to the Attorney General and the lawyers for negotiating it, which is not easy for us to do. But the money's here. And like Jamie Decker of our board called it blood money. And he's right. So to treat us like this and to marginalize the impacted community like this is, I describe it as legally wrong, politically obtuse, and morally reprehensible. This opioid settlement is our Stonewall moment. As many of you know, Stonewall, which is the beginning of the gay rights movement, many is the New York police busted a gay bar on New Year's Eve. And instead of all going quietly to jail, there was a riot for 3 days. I don't want to riot, but I do think this is where it turns and where stigma ends and marginalization ends. And we have a say in our own fate with our own money. So the third one is the impacted population should have a significant representation on all One Ohio boards. And that sort of compactly restates the 2 points above. It also, opioid settlement spending should prioritize reducing overdose death. If you read Harm Reduction Ohio and the research I've done, Ohio has below average drug use rates. What we have is above average, like ranking 2 to 5 in drug use death rates. So even the name, the Recovery Foundation, we're all for people in recovery. A lot of friends on the line here are in recovery, but death is the priority here, death. And the One Ohio agreement, for some reason, and what on the bylaws that the foundation plans to adopt is all about recovery. It says nothing about reducing overdose death. That tells you that they don't have lived or shared experience, because anytime you get a bunch of people with experience with opioids, saving lives is like above everything else, which is what naloxone is. You all know, say, you can't recover if you're dead. So then 2 other things, I think this is, and Friends of Ohio is free to change it. I think the opioid settlement money should not be used to criminalize or stigmatize people in any way. I don't think it should be used for drug task forces. The national agreement did not allow it to be used for drug task forces, but Ohio struck its own agreement, and it can be used for law enforcement in the Ohio agreement. So it can be used in Ohio, but I don't think that's desirable. And that's why, that's one of my concerns about the chair, is her number 1 priority is drug task force and criminalizing the populations, which will increase overdose death. And I'm personally not going to make that a big issue, but if the board was full of people with lived and shared experience, that wouldn't be an issue. It would take care of itself and the priorities would set. And then the final one that I will work on is One Ohio should be transparent, follow open meetings and public records law, period. You can't have $500 million of government money and no right to know what's happening. It's not a privilege that we know what is happening with this money. It's a legal right. So what I was hoping to do is stop, get your thoughts, especially about Friends of One Ohio. I've talked with some of you about Friends of Ohio, but now that you've got this broader sense of what's going on, I would just like to crowdsource how we can get ourselves into the process that we've been shut out of. So I'll turn it over to you, Amanda Lynn, and I will mute myself.
Okay. Thank you all so much for listening to Dennis's presentation. We got some wonderful comments as it began that I would like to begin with, and then how we will do the question and answers. If you could please put your question in the chat box or send it directly to me, and then we will have you unmute. You can turn your camera on and off if you would like, and you can read the question yourself, or if you do not want to read or be on camera, I'm happy to read it for you. First and foremost, I would like to take a moment and I put this in the chat, to mention that there is one member of the board who acknowledges his lived experience. He has over 40 years in recovery. And I think that it would be a disservice to his struggle and his experience to silence his voice or his experience. So I would like to make that change in our messaging. And I've also been asked to acknowledge that many members of the board have shared experience. And so in an effort not to make anyone out their personal experience, but to acknowledge the struggles that they have faced in this epidemic that has in many ways touched the lives of every Ohioan and every person, I believe, in the United States. Just a moment to acknowledge that and apologize if anyone feels that we have misrepresented their story or their struggle, because that is never our intention at Harm Reduction Ohio. The first person who asked a question was Ashley Rosser. Ashley, would you like to ask your own question? And after Ashley, we will have I'm so sorry. I believe the next person would be, and Kayla, I'm going to say your name wrong. I really apologize. And I'll have you go next after Ashley. So Ashley, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, so I was curious, just thinking all of this through, does anybody know if there's any logic at all as to how they picked and choose like the regions and then established, who's going to represent those regions and how much money they're going to get, like in picking the city over mental health boards? Like, what does anybody know the logic there? Is there an answer, or was this at the default for them, like their go-to?
I can tell you what the logic was. It's sort of just the way the legal structure worked. They were the plaintiffs. So, and I don't know why they didn't add mental health boards and local health departments, but they didn't. So these are all the people that sued. And the importance of One Ohio is that it's One Ohio, that the companies weren't going to give any money unless everyone agreed not to sue. So it's sort of like a one fell settlement. And that's why, that's the tricky part, is that these were the people who had the legal ability to sue, and that the companies wanted to agree to not sue for money. So it's also the task of creating these boards fell to the plaintiffs. It's a lot like if you, in most 501c3s, the board of the 501c3 will pick new board members. So the way it should have worked is that the county commissioners and the township trustees picked like an independent board, like Friends of Ohio, and then those boards would become self-perpetuating. But since it was all done in private and no solicitations, but it's really legal. And even like the regional map, as you probably notice, it doesn't follow any Ohio regions used now in public health or opioids, although I think it's a pretty decent approximation. And that was just drawn up by the lawyers in the room doing the best that they could. So the opioid settlement here, it's extruded what it was. And that's one thing that I haven't done anything is like nitpick the settlement. Like, should it be 30% or the legal fees? It's what the agreement was. And also, to their credit, getting 2,000 governments to sign on to a legal agreement is a very difficult task. And they did a superb job of that. And they had to give a lot of power to local townships to get those townships and those local governments to sign on. And that made the politics of getting the deal possible. That was a great accomplishment. It makes the execution of 2,000 governments nearly impossible.
Okay, can we please have our next question?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cale Burke. I'm the executive director of the Southeast Ohio Hope Center in Appalachia, Ohio. We're a recovery community organization. And based on even Harm Reduction Ohio stats, we have one of the highest overdose rates in the state, so in Appalachia, Ohio. So, and first of all, I want to thank you for doing this work. I know it's hard at the policy level, especially. And I use your stats from your website all the time. I cite them all the time. So I'm very grateful. My question is, we spent a half an hour talking about the non-transparency of how this process is taking place, correct? Like, so taking that logic and moving it forward, shouldn't we insist that these funds go into nonprofit organizations for the transparency's sake, instead of it going to private corporations where we have no idea where this money is going to? There's no audit trail. And quite frankly, they're making money off of this. So I don't feel like this money should go to a corporation where it's going to help their bottom line. I think this money needs to go into the community and help that loop not be closed at a for-profit level. Is there any way? I mean, that's not anywhere on this presentation, so I didn't know what the logic was behind that.
Yeah, and this is what has to be decided. There's no restrictions on providing money to for-profit organizations or not-for-profit organizations. This is why it's so important for everyone to be involved, because that's a complex issue that the agreement is silent on, but can be tricky. Because as you probably know, Cole, there's a number of like for-profit treatment centers that are pretty harm reduction friendly, especially with methadone. So it's tricky, but you're absolutely right.
If there's no audit trail, you can't go in and find out where that money went. So, and there's a number of for-profits on this call are involved in this work. And I mean, I'm not so sure I feel the ethics are there on that.
Yeah, so one thing that the foundation and that everyone needs to do is establish the audit trail, or establish like what criteria and what auditing requirements there are. And that hasn't been done yet, but that's an important task for sure.
And it's Cale, by the way, not Kyle. That's okay. You're going to see a lot more of me. And I just want to make sure you say my name correctly.
Yeah, that's why I just apologize to you too as well. This is our third meeting, and I'm not going to forget this time. So I really appreciate you having patience as somebody with a complicated name. And the next person who wanted to ask a question is Kyle, and then I'm going to read two that were sent to me as a direct message that people are not willing to read aloud. So Kyle, if you could go ahead, and then we'll move on to those two direct messages.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Kyle Johnston. I come here representing myself and people of like harm reduction. I started harm reduction, learning about harm reduction about 8 months ago. I am a 12-step member who woke up and decided that I would not be stigmatizing and shameful and treat people with respect. And over my time of doing so, I've openly, outwardly spoken out against shame and stigma that honestly is the reason why, if anything, leads to people to overdoses and isolating and continued drug use. And I mean like severe drug use, because I learned something, that people that use drugs are good people. People that are on MAT are in recovery. And then something else that's really true is that you don't have to earn recovery. And all these recovery places out here that I've taken notice of, for the most part, it's almost like they force people into submission and they have to earn support every day. So my question is, it's like, I'm not worried about who has the money, more or less like where this money is actually going. But like, there are no in-person harm reduction places out here for the most point. Like, yeah, you can do harm reduction online, but why isn't it represented as a sober house or a recovery house or like a safe living center? You know, like there's nothing out here for us to take people to. That's why we meet them at our cars or meet them at homeless shelters or you know, like hotels. Like there's nothing out here for us.
And where are you located, Kyle?
I'm located in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a 35-year-old Black man. And I started speaking out against a lot of the shame and even like the misuse of government aid and money. And I called these
Kyle's in
people out.
Lorain, correct, right? Kyle, you're in Lorain,
Yes, I'm in
Ohio?
Lorain, Ohio. Yeah. I've been doing this for a little bit, and I am not as keen as you guys. I thank you. I'm a newcomer. I'm not keen on you with the numbers and all that, but just because I don't know the numbers and stats, it doesn't mean that my heart doesn't feel the same way. And I would just like to see this money at least form a center or two or a shelter or two for people that are on MAT, still using drugs, and then like campaigning in these rooms where they say that MAT is bad. Like, why are we not standing outside, showing the truth and telling the truth? And it's like people are worried about their positions and their jobs and their titles. But like, I think the person living deserves a better fight. And that's what I do with Drop the Label. But that's
Thank you,
my question
Kyle.
is, are we going to put money in towards that?
Well,
Thank you.
I appreciate it, Kyle. And 90% of people in harm reduction, their first commitment is to direct service. So I view my job as to get you the resources for you to do your job, because you know what's going on in Lorain and Cleveland, the sober house you want, and this money should be supporting what you do. So I appreciate, you don't have to worry about this. This is the job of others to make it possible for you to do your job.
I would like to read this one question that was submitted. It was, if you could choose the 2 members of the board that are open, what would be ideal? We know what is wrong with the board as it stands, but what would be a welcome addition to the board that would actually represent us if it's nothing about us without us?
Like, I hate like being
The hard one.
particular. I did mention to the Canton lawyer, encourage her to seek out a minority member or someone with lived experience or both to add a little diversity to the board. But it's really, to me, it's that community's decision. And I'm happy with whatever it is. It's just in the totality, if you let people be involved, then it will look like it's supposed to look.
Gotcha. The next question that was sent anonymously. Well, actually, let's go ahead because I'm looking at time. Let's go ahead to Abby. Abby, can you do yours? Then it'll be Pauline, and then we'll do China. So Abby, you go ahead, and then after Abby, Pauline, and China, I'll read another one. Go ahead, Abby.
Thank you, Nita. And Dennis, thank you and everybody for putting this together. So I guess my question is, I mean, we understand kind of the mechanics of what they're doing. So I mean, we know that we want people on the board, but I mean, I think that we have an opportunity to potentially put together kind of a list of, not really, I guess, demand, but I mean, essentially that, like, I know like there are many of us that are on this call that have been meeting about like policy things here in Ohio for a while and talking about things like funding kinship care, talking about person first housing, funding for expansion of syringe service programs and harm reduction services. Do we have an opportunity to put together a response? Or is that something, that we're looking at as far as putting together a response, listing these things as priorities? And, is this potentially a time to have some type of larger umbrella organization, which Dennis, I know you have talked about a great deal, kind of bringing together all of like the harm reduction and recovery folks here in the state of Ohio to function as a collective voice?
Most definitely, Abby.
The next question from the anonymous group is Pauline, are you still here? Trying to find you. I saw you raise your hand, and I saw somebody because I believe they're on the phone. Are you still here? I'm trying to find you. I don't see you. If you come back, we'll get you. I see you, China and Jamie. China, you go ahead. I'll read a question and then we'll get Jamie. Everybody, this was scheduled to end at 8. I'm totally comfortable staying on so everybody's voices can be heard. I am assuming Dennis is as well.
No, it was
this one-
scheduled to end at 8:30. We got plenty of time.
Oh, great. Then I'm wrong. Don't listen to me. Go ahead, China. We're good then.
All right. Hello, everyone. Dennis, I don't know if you have sent out the 8-page document listing the approved, buckets, I'm calling them, of what these dollars can be spent on. But the one that jumps out to me is that it can be used for services already rendered. So in my conversations, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, well, we had a huge drain on our law enforcement response and our EMS response and our healthcare systems. And it's like the natural inclination for people who have not been directly affected by the opiate crisis is to pay these services that their community has already been,
Yeah, actually, it's not quite that way. The 55% that the foundation getting cannot be spent on that. It has to be spent, it's new spending. Of the 30% share local government is getting, they can spend up to 15% to reimburse themselves for past costs if they document themselves. So even if they get the full 15%, 85% is still new money. And that's one reason this is so important. You're not taking money away from anyone else. You got a fresh billion to be created.
well, that's great to hear.
The anonymous question, thank you, China, is how does somebody join Friends of One Ohio and how will it be funded?
I see it as a voluntary organization that doesn't require a lot of funds. Harm Reduction Ohio can do the infrastructure. Like we've already got like a website and, and a Facebook page, but really it would be bubble up, from the people. Cause I don't, Harm Reduction Ohio already has enough. And so that's the idea. So that's why I'm hoping like someone would, maybe the next thing to do is to hold a startup meeting for Friends of One Ohio and get people to volunteer to be the positions and see what regions we've covered. Does anyone have suggestions on like actionable steps that would need to happen to make this happen?
Yes, everyone, please put that in the chat and we can discuss that because I think that would be awesome. Jamie, go ahead and ask your question.
So yeah, that was sort of kind of my question. This Friends of One Ohio, I was wondering if like maybe if we did this, then maybe, I know here in Hancock County, we are going to talk. We have a meeting with our county commissioner next week. I'm not going to be there. I've not been invited, even though I've reached out many times, but we do have a couple people from our peer board, advisory board, that are going. And so I was wondering if like this bigger entity that if we make it could help the local with local stuff, because I mean, a lot of people just don't know how to do that. And that's not a knock on anybody, because I certainly don't know a whole lot about some of that stuff either. And I'm not very diplomatic as you are, Dennis. I shouldn't be involved in some of those meetings, but yes, that's what I was sort of asking was, will this Friends of One Ohio, well, how involved will they be? Like, is there any plans or any of that, or has that been discussed or any of that stuff?
I think it's sort of like what you're thinking, what I'm thinking, what Abby's thinking is just to start the harm reduction group working together, thinking together, sharing ideas. So if anyone wants to volunteer for Friends of One Ohio, maybe put it in the chat or send an email or something, because it seems to be getting a pretty positive reception, the idea. So, so I'm really excited to facilitate it. I don't want to impose it, and not that harm reduction people, ornery people that you are will let anything be imposed. But I'll talk with Amanda Lynn and others, and we'll try in the next week or so to like create a Friends of Harm Reduction Ohio call. And we do have like a mailing list to get on and to join. And some people, I haven't looked at it lately, but I think we might have 10 or 20 people who have already joined just that. Do you have any suggestions, Jamie and Abby, on how to make it? But like sharing ideas is.
Yeah. I think everyone who wants to be involved, please put your email in the chat. If I don't already have it, I'll put mine at the end of this. We could start an email mailing list. There's a sign up on our website and Facebook page. And the beginning, like Ashley has suggested, is just start a meeting, see who can contribute what. We all have full-time jobs and other things. So I understand that it would be asking a lot of everybody, but our collaborative efforts, I think, could really get something done, and identify those individual regions and needs for the folks who might not have the capacity for that. So we could do some education and capacity building, which is one of the big principles of harm reduction. So I think the best way to get that started would be with an email chain and setting a time to meet.
It also might make sense. Harm Reduction Ohio hasn't had its annual conference since COVID, and we've been like sort of to time it to that, so people from around the state can actually meet in person and form Friends of Ohio that way. Does that make sense to anyone, to actually have like an in-person meeting in Central Ohio on a Saturday, a weekend?
As long as we had a hybrid option, I think we could make that happen. So if folks couldn't make it, they could Zoom
Yeah.
in.
So.
Okay, another question is that was anonymous, is the fear of criminalization and further harm done to people by law enforcement is paramount. Will any of this work be done on research? Will any of this money be spent to be done on research and ways to expand the Good Samaritan law, or the harms that it causes it with its current limitations? Kind of a loaded question, but that is the question.
I'll just make a quick comment. Is the opioid agreement does require all the money be spent on evidence-based practices. There's also a separate provision in there, especially with the foundation, I think it is, that it will fund innovation and research. So I think it would be exciting to do like specific research on Good Samaritan law. Like we were going to try to have an intern do like how many police officers, police departments carry naloxone. Nobody knows. And it's something that should be known. So that would be a good question to use some One Ohio money to answer some basic questions that can help us improve what we're doing.
I don't see any other hands raised. I'm trying to check the chat. There's a lot of folks coming in. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question? I see lots of people willing to get involved, and we are so grateful not only that you're here today, but that you want to carry this torch forward and make sure that our communities get their needs met, and that this money is spent in a wise way that benefits everyone affected by the epidemic. But is there any more questions directly for Dennis? You can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask at this point.
Hey, this is Trish. I can't put nothing in the chat because I'm on my phone. The question I have for Dennis is, did you find out who Victoria Stanley is?
The name doesn't ring a bell. Was I supposed to find out?
Oh, no, you had messaged me. She's on the committee for Licking County, or for the county here.
Yeah.
And we've looked and cannot find anything on her. And I wondered if you ever did.
Oh, yeah. The Licking County One Ohio board, which I was not qualified to be on, is they have one, it's called Interested Citizen, and nobody knows her. Like,
No,
who works
there's
with
no
opioids.
information on her.
Yeah, as well as like the head of the mental health board didn't know her. So
No.
I think it's like 7 government people and an interested citizen, and she's an office manager. So, you know, it'd be interesting to know who she is.
Yeah, we've done some extensive research and we can't find anything on her. So I just wondered if you had, and then I will get with you. I would like to sit down with you sometime soon about Licking County. So I'll give you a call.
Yeah, and I think as some people have mentioned, it's important not to make it personal because, you know, any individual on a committee has something to add to it. It's just that it needs the right broader conversation to have. So it would be fascinating to have someone who has like no experience with opioids or doesn't know anything about it. And I often meet people like that, and it's quite interesting to hear their first questions. What does naloxone do? So I would say one of those 29 members should be a total novice.
Michelle, you're welcome to ask your question.
Hey, Dennis, it's Michelle in Canton. I just have a question, and this may sound ignorant, but because we are just as in the dark as a lot of areas, I think, not knowing like the selection process for this committee and whatnot. But you mentioned something in the beginning about monies coming to Canton.
Yep.
But I was under the impression that the local health departments wouldn't receive any of that. So how would our syringe access program benefit from that money?
Because Canton is different, is that your health department is part of the city government.
Ah.
And it's the same in Columbus Public Health is part of Columbus city government. In Licking County, it doesn't work that way. It would have to cross the bureaucracy barrier. And that's why I emailed like your head nurse, who's a wonderful person, and she didn't know about it. That 45,000 has the syringe program written all over it.
Oh, for sure. I'm with the IN portion of our harm reduction
Yeah.
initiatives. And I don't, I'm not directly involved with SWAP, but that's refreshing because Amanda and I were just talking about this today, like the crucial funding needed, to keep SWAP going.
Yeah.
It's imperative. So that's really refreshing to hear you say that.
I exchanged emails with Diane Thompson.
Yeah.
And that 45,000 will make all the difference. SWAP has been struggling to survive.
Yeah.
Since the beginning, and that would make the difference.
Yeah, for sure. Great. I'm so glad I heard at least that on the call.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for all the work you're doing.
Another chat question is, was there a reason, this kind of I think goes back to what Ashley was asking, was there a reason that Adam H boards and health departments, depending on the region, were left out of the decision and left out of the board, being on the board? Are they going to be getting any of their own funding from this, or are they do they have to fight for it too?
They were left out just for legal reasons on who has standing to sue and stuff like that. They should get money, but they'll have to get it from the municipality for the 30% local share, or the county, or they'll have to get it from the foundation. So as people on this call will know, like, you can be very close, but it's hard getting it. Heck, it's hard getting money from Ohio Department of Health to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and back and forth. So that barrier is not insurmountable, but it's notable. Jamie, a quick question. Is the Findlay Health Department separate, a distinct jurisdiction than the city or the county?
We're both. We used to be a county and a city. There used to be separate. And
right,
now,
but you have your own board of directors, and you're really
we have our own board of health, our own board, all that stuff. Yeah.
So unfortunately, that makes it harder for you to get money. I was trying to think today what syringe programs are parts of cities and counties, and that would be easier because it's the same jurisdiction.
I doubt they would give us any money.
Exactly. So
I highly doubt that anyways. Our sheriff's probably got his hands out, so.
Another question came through, Dennis, that says, So sorry, I just scrolled back down on accident. Are the board members and regional board members collecting salaries or any compensation for the work they're doing? We believe people should be paid for their time, but these people were hired by people who aren't us, and we don't know what their CVs are.
They are not being paid. And most of them, because like I think 8 or 9 of them are county commissioners, so they're paid county. So they're doing this as part of their job, you know, serving on boards and commissions. So no one is being paid, like Sheriff Tharp isn't getting paid anything. So it is all volunteer. And I think and that's true at the state, regional, and local level.
Well, my personal anecdote is that's some good news. And we had someone's hand up, but I think it's gone down. So maybe their question was answered. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? They can just unmute and go ahead.
Hi, Dennis. This is Lily Jenkins from Benton County.
Really.
I wonder, I'd considered, and I know this wouldn't be helpful in every county. My county is a small county. And so I know the person that was appointed to the regional board. And do you see any benefit in me meeting with that person or people in other counties meeting
do.
with that person and kind of advocating for people with lived experience and saying,
Definitely.
I've talked to a bunch of other people with lived experience, and this is what's happening in the conversation.
Yep.
Um,
I really
and
do.
to do
Lily,
that in
'cause
a way where we're not, I'm not combative or anything like
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah, because I think the person who represents you is a recently retired judge.
yeah, and I'm actually pretty impressed with that selection,
Yeah.
and I kind of knew that it was
Yeah.
going that way,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. If you, and this is why it's so difficult as well, it's nothing against any individual, but imagine if you were the board member, Lily, instead of him, that would make for a better board, but he's certainly qualified to be on the board. So I would encourage everyone to like take Friends of One Ohio seriously. And even though we may oppose them on some issues, there's nothing personal about it. And I thought of talking to that judge who's handled open meeting and public records cases. And I thought, you know, you sort of know the law, Judge. You might want to bring up the likelihood of one party prevailing, but
Right.
you know, and he's made like real thoughtful comments and everything. So I
He
definitely
really is great. He really is great. And I mean, as good as anybody with no experience or directly personal experience whatsoever can be. He is that.
Yeah, it would be awesome to have a couple, 1 or 2 judges on there. Yeah, I mean, diversity really means something to get a broad conversation.
We have another question. Colleen, did you want to ask a question? Sorry, I saw your camera, your camera open. The question in the chat is, there's 2. The first one is, for those of us who have tried to get audiences with members of our regional board and have been shut down, is there anything we can do to circumvent that?
I think yes. And, you know, I've been a reporter. I've had many doors shut in my face. And I think, one, you're always respectful, but if they won't meet you, you post it on social media. You post it accurately. And that's why once we get this Friends of Ohio Facebook page and that going is, you know, you always take the high road. And there's social media is powerful. You'll find from elected officials, even if I write a story and only 4 people read it, 3 of the 4 are that person, and the other is their staff person, and the other one's their wife, and they take it very personally. The way not to succeed is to allow them to think that they're better than you and for you to accept it and to say, oh, they'll never let me in. You have a right to be in that room, and we have a right to be in this boardroom. Like just adding 1 token could be even worse, you know, than having real representation, because that token person would have so much pressure on them in all different directions.
Jamie, go ahead and ask your question, then I'll ask the other one in the chat.
It wasn't a question. It was it was a comment to the last question. We, the only way we got a meeting with our county commissioner was we have somebody that is on our like peer board, and they're a veteran and they work for the veteran services of our county. And he went and demanded a meeting and they gave it to him, which I demanded a meeting and they didn't even answer. They didn't even say no to me. So I think if you can find somebody that's your champion that they'll maybe originally at first listen to, that's probably your best bet.
Solid advice. And Kale also said they work for us if they're government officials, you know, and I think that is true and good advice as well. But Jamie, that advice that if you have a champion or you have a friendly who might be able to use their voice to open the door, that's a good way to get in. The other question from the chat was, is it possible to expand the board beyond the 2 members who are still open, the 2 seats that are still open?
I think definitely yes. Like my goal is to have every board appointment at the state, local, and regional level invalidated, other than the 10 state appointments, which the governor has the right, the attorney general. But all of the others, I think, were not made in compliance with law and should be invalidated. And then rather than just like knocking down the castle, that gives us an opportunity to have announcements and have meetings. Who would like to be on this board? Who should be on the board? So that's my goal, and I'm optimistic that it's going to happen.
I would also like to make note that there was a clarification made that there will no longer be an action to vote on transparency at Thursday's meeting. Ms. Gross gave me that clarification.
Well, if Holly's on us, the transparency policy is not on the agenda, Holly, but the transparency policy has been incorporated into the code of regulations, which is essentially the bylaws. Has that been, are you not voting on the code of regulations, or has that part been removed from the bylaws?
I'm looking at our participants list. I don't see Holly here any longer, but
Got it.
sorry, I was going through the, and she also shared and said, thank you for acknowledging Mr. Gregory, and that most members of the board say that they have shared experience and that should be acknowledged. Please go ahead.
Just in reaction to talking to your local officials, I did go to the Licking County Commissioner's office and asked, and after a lot of hesitation, they finally told me who they had selected for the board. So I contacted 4 of the members, and asked about people with lived experience. One of the members says there are people with lived experience, and she is the city prosecutor. And so I spoke to her after the meeting and clarified what I meant. And she said, well, yeah, we have somebody in the treatment field. And that's like, no, that's not what I mean. I contacted the head of our mental health and recovery board and asked for the same question. She did not respond to my request. The county commissioner, who is on the committee, basically said, oh, sure, we'll have open meetings. We'll let people in. When I asked for that confirmation in an email where he would have to say, yes, we will, he would not respond to me. So I think we still need to try to keep that dialogue open, but I don't have a whole lot of hope here in Licking County. When I heard the 15% could go for past local expenses, I could see it being spent on, law enforcement expenses. I just don't think the people who are on the committee, like we don't know who Victoria Stanley is. One's a township trustee from Etna. I don't see them having the knowledge to make decisions on preventing overdose deaths. I just, I'm really concerned about that. So how do we go about, I guess, do we come up with a list of things that we would like to see funded? The city prosecutor basically told me, I asked her how our decision is going to be made. And she says, well, it'll probably be like a grant process. And I said, well, how does that work? Well, we really haven't figured that out yet. So I just think we need to have some more details on how this money can be applied for and how you go about getting it. We don't have that.
It's all new and these processes are being created. You make a good experience about lived and shared experiences, which is one reason I sort of defined it on the call. Is like I talk to police officers who think they have lived experience because they arrested someone. And Holly, I was hoping she was still on the call. I could tell from like some of our earlier comments, she didn't really understand the nuance, and it's not her fault. Like it's up to us. Lived experience and shared experience is sort of like coded. It's not saying what it really is, but yeah. But
Ashley, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say though, they went around the room and they spent 2 or 3 minutes describing themselves, and nobody other than the Ashtabula County Commissioner described any personal way that it suffered to them. And if they're keeping it in private, that's understandable, but in a way that's sort of stigma confirmed. And especially people with lived experience, and I disagree with you, Amanda Lynn. If you had an alcohol problem in the 70s, that doesn't give you lived experience with the opioid problem in 2022.
We don't disagree on that. I just think it's important to acknowledge people's experience and struggles. If that is, we got to be harm reductive, but we don't disagree on that.
So and I appreciate like his and everything he's done, and he's a good guy. He's a social work professor at Ohio State, but you see that like on a lot of mental health boards where the lived experience is like a 70-year-old person who struggled with alcohol and he's a 12-stepper, etc. And, it's never been written about, but there's a conflict between people who struggle with alcohol and people who struggle with opioids. And if you're a 12-stepper and you're abstinence and you suffer with and you relapse on alcohol, you get drunk. You relapse on opioid and you can get dead. So, there's medication-assisted treatment and that rub is there all the time. So I do think it's important, especially in this context of money we have for people who died of opioids, to have lived experience with opioids themselves. Heroin would be interesting, but even that is like a little, heroin from 1979. Maybe you know, Jamie, because maybe you're old enough and you were doing it in 79, but it's different. And like, I
I gotta push back. I'm sorry, but I have to push back on that. I am so sorry. I'm not being disrespectful, but I'm a person in long-term recovery. I haven't had a drink or a drug in 11 years. And I'm just as capable of relapsing and giving it hold of some marijuana that's got fentanyl in it and it'll kill me tomorrow. So I think that you're really kind of slicing it thin here. Like, I think we need to be real open to all of this, because this problem hurts everyone, right? I am just as capable of going out and drinking today and going out and getting some marijuana and it kill me. That is from your stats from the opiate conference.
Our stats on the opioid conference, fentanyl laced marijuana, if it does exist, does not combust at the rate in which somebody could be affected by fentanyl and die. Everything we push out is that is misinformation, that fentanyl laced marijuana cannot cause harm.
There's a lot of that's not true. We're all capable of relapsing.
Yes, but I just don't want the misinformation that fentanyl laced cannabis can cause harm, because that is not a real thing. I'm happy to share any scientific and evidence-based documents and research on that. I think you're right, Kayla. I don't think it's appropriate to compare trauma or to compare recovery or to compare those things and whose blood is worth more and whose life lost and whose struggle is worth more. But the misinformation about the cannabis and fentanyl, I will share that. I will share links to that literature. But I think it's
But that
appropriate
came
that we
from
have these
Dennis's
discussions.
presentation at the opiate conference I was at 3 weeks ago. Did you not stand up there and say that?
It didn't come from Dennis. It came from the person that was beside Dennis, because me and that guy had a conversation right after that. And I told him there is no proof anywhere that you can find for me from a BCI where any marijuana has been confiscated that has been found to have fentanyl in it.
No,
None.
it was Orman Hall that had the wrong information, which I really have a hard time finding out, believing that Orman Hall's.
Told me that he said that because you can. And I asked him, I want the proof that there is been fentanyl found in marijuana, and nobody can give me the proof. All I get is anecdotal stuff about, oh, a person told a cop that he had just smoked marijuana. Of course, that's what he said, because who's going to say they shoot dope? I'm going to tell a cop.
We're talking about empirical data that was released in a report that was the crux of this presentation that I saw 2 weeks ago. So now I'm really confused.
Well, you find me the proof that you can find that there has been fentanyl found in marijuana, and you can send it to my email, and I will publicly yell from the tops of the buildings that there is fentanyl in marijuana.
I mean, I'm just relaying what I saw at the opiate conference. That's all I'm doing.
I would like to jump in here really quick. So I've been collecting a list of research-based articles that are by actual experts in the field, not misinformation, right-wing news articles, whatever. But I have a Google Doc that lists all of the science, all the studies, all the peer-reviewed stuff, and I can send
You
it
have
to
some
you
of the
for sure.
redactions too, right?
There's a lot of redactions. Yep. I did a whole presentation on this for our Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, and talks about the redaction process of what happens. But I don't want to get too far off the point of the call, but I would be glad to talk to you about that later if you want, and send you all the information I have. But I also wanted to say, I don't think the original thing that anybody was trying to say is to compare traumas here. I think it's really important to note proximity. So someone that, drank alcohol in the 70s isn't going to understand what being in the fentanyl crisis is like. And I don't think that's comparing in any way. I just think that's talking about proximity, and someone that is using drugs right now is going to know what it's like right now, especially for people that are working in the field, boots on the ground right now, underground harm reduction programs. Damn, I forgot the original point I was trying to make because we got off topic.
Let's do that. Let's take a second.
Yeah.
Let's gonna reel back in. I think that Friends of One Ohio, I think that Harm Reduction Ohio, and I think that our partners like Hale at Southeast Ohio Hope Center, we need to be on the same page and use our voices together, and not silence anyone or their experience. And so I just want to take a second to thank everybody. These are hard things to talk about. They are sensitive things to talk about. And nobody, in my opinion, and this is me, is more important than somebody else. And so I think it is important that we are all able to be heard on this. Jessica, if you could ask your question, then we'll go back to Jamie and Ashley who had questions. And at the end here, we're running a little bit over, but I think everybody's impassioned and willing to be here. So Jessica, if you could go ahead.
It really definitely wasn't a question, but I guess this is just, so this is us who all agree, right? And we're all people with lived experience at whatever that level. And you know what I mean? We all understand this at some level, and we have people who are not us making these decisions, and we're in here having this argument right now. So I think that is just what's really terrifying. This is terrifying. I don't know. It wasn't a question. I apologize, but
no, that's okay. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability and your insecurity with how we feel. And I think that it's something Suzanne mentioned, and I saw another chat earlier that we haven't talked about, is the age of the folks on the board. Is anyone under 40? That was a question that was asked. Is there anybody who had different opioid struggles? Maybe they were only ever using street opioids. Maybe they did have prescriptions. Maybe they had long-term prescriptions for 30 years before everything changed. Does the age of the boards represent the population necessary, or is it everybody above a certain age? Dennis, can you answer that question for us?
It's a good question, but I don't have the facts. I don't know the ages of the participants. I'm trying to think, looking at it, there's probably not many under 40. But as a 64-year-old, I wouldn't say that that's an objection.
Of course, right? And so that's one of the reasons we're having these conversations, is it's difficult. Recreational users and that don't have are also at risk for fentanyl, have also been at risk for things, and they don't often have a voice in these rooms. And I think that's important as well. Ashley, did you remember your question?
Yeah, thanks. I was just typing it all out. So I was gonna say, I am creating a Google Doc for action items on here, and I wanted to get I don't know, people's feedback. Should we have another follow-up to this conversation? Is that something that you guys were already planning to do, or should some of us just take the lead on that? Because I will definitely help.
Are you saying, is the question, should we have room to have reoccurring meetings about these discussions and what the board should do?
Yeah.
And will there also be coverage of how the board is being handled? And should those be separate or one and the same?
I would love for you to take the lead, Ashley, because you've got so many skills. But
Thank you. I'm up for it. I also have there's a harm reduction group called the Ohio's Harm Reduction Alliance on Facebook. It used to be just dedicated to Northeast Ohio, but I changed it to represent all of us because we're all in Ohio. Doesn't matter what region I'm in, I guess. I just want to let you guys know that that's a good way for us to stay in connection. It's a private group, so it's a pretty safe space for us to organize together. So for people who are on Facebook, feel free to join.
you've done a great job with that. So maybe you and I can talk over the next couple of days and
yeah.
I just want to put out that I did not mean to get heated either, but like the person said, we are fighting in amongst ourselves. This is kind of like the difference in the political group. One of the political groups fall under the same camp and they go boom, boom, boom. The other side has all kinds of different agendas. And that's kind of what we're seeing, the people that are in the field like we are, or the people that are at the policy level. They have their agenda, boom, 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 boom. And here we are all coming from different lived experiences. So the bottom line is, in my humble opinion, let's stop people from dying. It does not matter. Nothing else matters. We can't get people sober if they're dead. That's the bottom line, in my opinion. And I will listen to anything. If you show me empirical data to change my mind, I am coachable. Change my mind. I want to see it, but I'm not going to get dug in on one position or the other. And we have to come under one banner. We have to come under one goal, is to keep people from dying. Bottom line. I will shut up now. I'm sorry. I got heated. I'm sorry.
It's real, and I appreciate everyone being respectful in their response, and thank you for saying you're sorry, but it's real, it's hard, and this is difficult stuff. We are about 8 minutes over. I'm happy to take 2 more questions and then wrap it up, and maybe schedule or look to our page for the follow-up for this. The discussions of Friends of One Ohio, which I hope you will all join, and then also Dennis's coverage of what's happening while we try to mitigate the harm that's already happening with the One Ohio Recovery Foundation. Go ahead, Jamie, and then we'll take 1 more question after that.
Okay, I want to apologize also, but that gets me a little heated sometimes. But I guess my comment is that I don't want to say anybody's recovery is not recovery, no matter what they have an issue with. But I have an issue when it's the only person on this board is an alcoholic. Okay, not that I have a problem with him being there, the problem is he is the representative of, it seems like, people with lived experience. And if there are others with lived experience on there and they don't wish to say anything, then they don't represent me. Okay. They don't represent me, because I want people that are going to say that they're going to, it's stigmatizing to say, well, I can't say that I had a problem because of what people will think about me. So if you have lived experience and you need to keep it quiet, that's fine with me, because that's your life, but you don't represent me then. That's the point I want to make.
I think that's a lot of wisdom, Jamie, and I'm going to take that to heart personally. I really appreciate that, because that's true. These are representatives advocating for this. And if they are too stigmatized, or there is some other barrier to them being open with their own struggle, then how can they have an open mind and do restorative justice as it needs to be done regarding these issues? Abby, would you please conclude us?
Sure. I just had a quick question, more so for Ashley, and then just kind of a comment. But Ashley, I think you had said that you were compiling some resources related to like marijuana, cannabis with fentanyl. And I know that there is a wealth of other information that has been compiled across all of the different groups that many of us are in. Could this potentially be an opportunity as we build, the Friends of One Ohio, to create a repository of knowledge, so that way, as we enter these spaces together, we're able to have kind of a shared and better understanding? Because oftentimes, we've all been to conferences and meetings where people cite incorrect information, and sometimes it happens, inadvertently. But I think we also have to remember, when we're walking into these spaces, that, we are encountering people that often are politically motivated, and they have very specific agendas. And, we're all here because we want to keep the people we love alive, and we want to keep our friends and our neighbors and all of these things. Not everyone has that goal. And, ultimately that is the thing that unites us, and so we can work together to help educate each other. I learned something new every day from all of you guys. So if that would be something I think that could maybe be beneficial. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but like if we could just have like a shared knowledge bank, I think it could be really good.
I think if everyone understands how to use Google Drives have really good sharing platforms for teams of people. So I think that it would be helpful for us to have like a shared Google Drive where we can compile things. And so if this comes up again, oh, here's my Google Doc on fentanyl laced marijuana studies and research, stuff like that. So when it comes up, we're not always expending our time on the same things over and over again. I think that would help.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for organizing that. Dennis, would you like to close us out? And before I have Dennis say thank you and close us, I would just like to thank everyone again for coming. We started with about 49 participants and we're down to 24. I know why you're still here listening and using your voices. And I personally, HRO thanks you, and I, Amanda Lynn, thank you. We need you, and I am excited to work together to make this all happen.
And I'll just close by saying thank you too. What an amazing group of people on this call. What an amazing group of caring human beings. I'm just so proud to be part of this group. So thanks very much. And we'll contact everyone and try to get Friends of One Ohio going. And I do think we need to remember friends, like the Quaker Friends is sort of, I like that positive attitude, because you don't have success working among people who think like you. You have success being friends with people who disagree with you. And they're often beautiful people, as you know. When you talk to them about their experience, life is way more complicated than you ever imagined. So thanks very much, and remain optimistic. I'm old and I've seen a lot of social change, and the arc of justice is swinging in Ohio. This group with 49 people would not have existed 4 years ago. And today it could be even bigger. It's an amazing thing that's going on. And I do think that we can convert it. Like, we shouldn't have the attitude, oh, this is what it is and it'll never change. It's not true. It will change. So thanks very much. And thank you, Amanda Lynn, for being such a wonderful host. Your acting degree from Ohio State always pays off.
I'll start using my history degree instead. Okay, thank you guys so much for being here again, and folks, not just guys. We appreciate you. We will post on our website and our Facebook when we'll meeting again, and I will follow up with emails for everybody and organizing Friends of One Ohio and how we can get that stuff started. So thank you again, and we will hear from you all and see you all again soon.